First of all, I want to say thanks. Thank you very much to Alexandra, to Sophia for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you, and I'm at the same time sad that I cannot be with you physically in Athens, but I hope that next time it will be possible. And I will talk today. It will be a more philosophical lecture than the others we had before. And because I'm a philosopher, and I will focus on the collaboration between Chillida and Heidegger in context of their common artist book, The Art and the Space. And I will focus on the concepts of space, time, place, and void. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger and the Spanish Basque sculptor Eduardo Chillida met for the first time in November 23rd, 1968, at the opening of an exhibition with works by Chillida, which took place at the art gallery Galerie im Erker in the Swiss city St. Gallen. The philosopher was not only interested in Chillida's sculptural work, but also in the artist's thought on space and time. The intellectual affinities which Heidegger felt with Chillida would convince him, as we will see, that the Spanish Basque artist was ideal to cooperate with him in a beautiful project. The artist's book, Die Kunst und der Raum, The Art and the Space, which he was planning. The place where they met first, the Galerie am Erker, had been founded in St. Gallen in 1958 by Franz Larese and Jörg Janet. When the gallery moved in 1963 to a bigger building, the two directors founded the printing press Erker Presse, together with the third business of the company, the publishing house Erker Verlag, which would publish small books, huge folders with graphic works, and from 1968 on, also artists' books in different sizes, where the artists of the gallery collaborated with writers, poets, and philosophers. The material production of the books took place in the printing press of the Erker Presse. In its ateliers, the artists created the graphic part, which corresponded to the book, while the authors of the written part traced their texts in their own handwriting in lithographical stones, as Heidegger would do it in 1969 with his text, The Art and the Space, Die Kunst und der Raum. In the meeting at the Galerie im Erker in November 1968, Heidegger proposed to Chillida, as we said before, the idea of the artist's book. The latter accepted immediately, and thus Heidegger worked in the following months on the essay for the book, while Chillida created 7 lithocollages and 1 lithograph. I know that you have a copy of the book there where you are having the event, but for the rest of the audience, I want to show you the different pages of the book so that you can have an idea how was this small-sized book. In the size, it is an anecdote of the notebooks of where Heidegger noted his reflections, because Chillida suggested to do it in this size. So we see here the book, the signing the already finished book, and this is some different perspectives, pictures that I took so that one can have an idea of how this book is, how it is composed. Here we see the handwriting of Heidegger with a lithocollage and by Chillida, and there was the other printed text. That Heidegger's handwriting is really very, very hard to read. It costs me a lot, and I just succeeded it after months of work, and together with a granddaughter of Heidegger, I managed to read something. I read German, but his handwriting is really very, beautiful, but very hard to read. Here we have some samples. This is the first page of the book with little collage, and the next pages with this beautiful little collage by Chillida. We will see after how the void and the place will enter in this cosmos, Chillidian and also Heideggerian cosmos. So I just show you these pages, and this is the last. Okay. The philosophical question which Heidegger wanted to approach in his essay concerns space. In particular, space linked to time in connection with art. It's worth pointing out that Heidegger understands space generally as something active and temporal. Accordingly, he says that spaces, Einräumen in German, which means something like that it spreads out and leaves free, which is why it has a fundamental importance for human life in Heidegger's view. According to the philosopher, human existence, which Heidegger calls in German always Dasein, not existence, which comes from Latin, Dasein is always essentially open. Dasein means in German literally being there. This being there, which is open for whatever, has evidently a spatial nature. The fact that human Dasein is essentially open, human existence is essentially open, however, does not only mean that the condition of human existence and of its liberty consists in being open for, but also that human being has to find his or her place on earth. So in Heidegger's view, space is not given in advance, but has to be looked for, has to be shaped and kept open in order to find one's place. With this sense of space, Heidegger refers to the Aristotelian concept of topos and chora. Such a concept of space as Heidegger's open dynamic notion cannot be enclosed in a conclusive conception. It has rather to manifest itself in the activity of an open thought, which implies a profound experience. But how may we achieve this experience? Like Heidegger, Chillida opposed to the abstract concept of natural science, when he conceived space as something alive, inseparable from time and from human being, something which is not simply given, but a secret, that is, something unknown, as Miquel already pointed also out, something unknown which one has to look for and experience. Both the philosopher and the artist not only shared their interest in the same problem, they also shared the way they were dealing with this problem. For both, the only possible way to do it was asking and searching. Starting from these premises, Heidegger had some expectations regarding art, as he hoped to find certain artistic manifestations which would provide a deep, that is, a true experience of space and time. These are all pictures I have taken in different public spaces from Chillida sculptures you have already seen. This is Windkamp, as you know. The philosopher had the intuition that art has, at least in principle, the potential to enable an experience of space in connection with time. And he expected that this experience could help to feel the true place of human being and of life on earth, a place which would be inseparable from things, that is, from a true being with the things, and thus from a true dwell, in German wohnen, a true dwell on earth. Precisely This was what Heidegger felt in Chillida's work and artistic thought, as he realized that Chillida's artworks invited to be there. That is, not only to be together with them, with the sculptures, and to contemplate them, but also to be inside, to be outside, to be around with them, and starting from then also with the things of its environment, so that you can have an experience, a little, at least experience. I will show you several slides, pictures I took from this wonderful sculpture meeting place in Madrid. It's one of the different meeting places. Sculptures that Chillida did, and 3 are in Madrid. This is one of them. And let us go around and make this sculpture alive. You will see that after I will go back to this making alive and to have this experience with and there where the sculpture is, with the sculpture and from this sculpture. You see all the different faces, not only perspectives, but different possibilities, which are in one sculpture, which is at the same time multiple sculptures. As we have seen, the experience of being there, which Chillida's works enable, is obviously not static. On the contrary, it implies a profound, open space-time experience. It requires a constant movement, which opens up to always new experiences, as true dwell does. That is, a dwell which grants human being a place in the world. In the following, I will present Chillida's concepts, questions, and inspired Heidegger, and which left important traces in his essay, The Art and the Space. The concepts which I will expose in relation with Chillida's conceptions, especially void and place, however, were not new for Heidegger. On the contrary, but precisely for this reason, as Heidegger recognized in Chillida a proximity to his own ideas, he adopted and incorporated them in his own thought so that he could take a further step in his own inquiry on space, a space which, as we have pointed out, confers human being an essential freedom to openness. According to Heidegger, it is impossible to understand the relationship between space and art without taking into account place, and together with place, the environment, which Heidegger calls in German Gegend. However, if one wants to understand the way how art and space interact, one has not just to consider place, but rather experience of place. Experience, in German Erfahrung, Experiencia, experience is something which is attained in motion. This is on the way. Being on the way means being open to the world, diving into this uncertain, and opening oneself to whatever will come. It implies a constant moving away and removing, and thus a reversal of remoteness and closeness. Let me show you now some different perspectives, or the better said, this wonderful sculpture I really love very much, the Monumento a la Tolerancia, Monument to Tolerance in Sevilla, in this, I know 5th anniversary of the so-called discovery of America in 1992. It was inaugurated there, and shall make this surrounding this experience on the way with the sculpture. Inside, outside, and around. Closing, opening, closing, opening, closing, opening. However, if the notion of place is connected with an open experience to the unknown, as Heidegger suggests, then it seems that place is necessarily something aerial, like the air. Does this mean that place doesn't exist, that places are lost in the void which devours them? Let us go back to the interplay between art and space and see if the experience of this interplay can give us the gift of a place. Let's contemplate for that purpose the space-time experience to which Chigida's sculpture invite. I have already showed you some examples. What does the artist suggest us? According to him, this sculpture should be, and it's a quote by Chihida, should be attentive to all which moves around it. Okay. He affirms further that what moves around the sculpture makes it alive. Let's see the whole passage that Chihida writes down in his notebook. I quote Chihida. Everything that rotates is round around. He says, redondo alrededor. Round around independently from the form of what rotates. You have access to the sculpture from this field of round around, redondo alrededor. There is no other possibility. The sculpture has always to show its face and to be attentive to all what moves around it. Chihida reminds us on one side that one cannot make sculpture alive if one does not get moving. That is, if one does not contemplate the work from all possible places that may be in connection with it. And this implies surrounding it, as we have seen, completely. Thus, on the way which performs countless places from where one may access the sculpture, one starts experiencing the work. And through this experience, one achieves to be with the sculpture. Heidegger would say one inhabits it, wohnen, habitar, one inhabits it. This, the dwell, which takes place, is the other sense of Chihida's assertion. So, in order to make a sculpture alive, we need both motion and dwell. Now, being with the sculpture, inhabiting it, means at the same time putting oneself in its place. Thus, one opens up with it, that is, from its own place to all, as Chihida says, which moves around. With the words of Heidegger, this means that an environment, Gegend, opens up, where one is going to find places which enter into dialogue with the sculpture and thus with its own place. Whilst opening and entering into dialogue with all what is there around, the sculpture place becomes alive. At the same time, this dialogue of the sculpture place makes all places connect to each other. Thus, the places which arise with the things in the environment become alive too, just as it occurred with the thing that is the sculpture. We have seen that entering in interplay with space, and thus with time, the sculpture donates an experience which finally makes arise a place. The place which is the sculpture itself. The experience of this place allows likewise to find other places that open up in the environment around the sculpture. Thus, the sculpture becomes a meeting place, lugar de encuentros. Meeting place, lugar de encuentros, is precisely the title of one of Chihida's sculptures, which were shown in the spring of 1969 in the artist's big exhibition at the Museum Kunsthaus Zürich in Switzerland, an exhibition which Heidegger visited in 1969 with great interest together with Chillida, as we will see subsequently. Adopting Chillida's idea of the sculpture as a meeting place which donates lots of places together with the things experienced with and from the sculpture, Heidegger proposes in The Art and the Space in his essay. I quote Heidegger: "The sculpture would be an embodying," he says, Verkörperung, an embodying of places which, opening an environment and keeping it open, bring together around them something that is free, that grants the particular things a stay and the human being a dwell among the things." End of quote. Taking up Heidegger's reflections, we can emphasize that art, and especially sculpture, which works with art, enables staying and dwell, because it possesses the power of to embody places, to give them a body, the places, which otherwise would vanish and get lost in the void, as they are linked to an experience of the uncertain. But how occurs what Heidegger calls the bodying of a place, this process by which a place becomes a body, becomes material? Where comes the place from? Where is it before it gets a body? However, isn't that an absurd question? No place can be in a place before it is a place. Indeed, one cannot say that a place is actually somewhere before it is a place. But probably we could sustain that as long it is nowhere, it has a potential being. Now, the potency that houses the possibility of a place is nothing less than the void. However, the void, which has the potency to generate places, is not nothing. It rather has a being. But how and when does it generate places? Heidegger sustains that it does so when it plays within the artwork. That is, when it becomes a sculpturing embodying. In The Art and the Space, he claims the following. I quote Heidegger: "The void is not nothing, neither is it a fraud. The void plays in the sculptural embodying in such a way that it donates places by searching and drafting." End of quote. A void which plays and by doing so searches, drafts, and donates places obviously cannot be a void as classical physics conceive it, which identifies it with an homogeneous and rigid space, a continuum of fixed sites or points, whose only function is to establish the separation between bodies and to make distances measurable. In Heidegger's essay for the Artist's Book, void gets a great importance with the new meaning of the donation of places. This meaning grew certainly upon ideas which Heidegger already had in mind. In former writings, Heidegger conceived void as something which grounds on what is free and makes possible giving and at the same time receiving. But the new meaning which Heidegger gives to the void in his essay, where he relates it with the donation of places, owes a lot from the intense study of Chillida's work and artistic thought, as well as from the conversations he maintained with the artists. This becomes evident if one considers the notes on space which Heidegger requested from Chillida and which he received in a letter from the artist, as well as if one takes into account some significant titles of works of Chillida's exhibition in Zurich, which Heidegger visited in 1969, as I said before, together with the artist. Let's now have a look on some of these works of that exhibition of 1969 in Zurich. The most important, the biggest work of the Zurich exhibition was Alrededor del Vacío, 4, Around the Void, 4, number 4, an iron sculpture which had a big, you see a huge Aryan sculpture of which had been brought from the Art Museum of Basel. This huge sculpture attracted much attention. In the context of our reflections on void, it is also interesting to mention two other works titled Modulación del Espacio 1 and 2, Space Modulation 1 and 2. We will see after a picture of them, and as well as three works titled Rumor de Límites, Rumor of Limits. Here you see one. In the exhibition were shown the number 1, the number 2, and the number 4 of these variations of the Rumor of Limits by Chillida. Heidegger was with no doubt interested in these works, not only because of their interplay with space, but also because of their titles. As I will show next, these titles add a new dimension to the reflections we have referred to before. Let's recall what we said about the interplay between the artwork and space, an interplay that arises when a beholder makes a real experience of the sculpture, converting it in a place. Chillida points out that one has to surround the whole sculpture in order to experience its spatiality and make it alive. When doing so, occurs, as we have seen, what Chillida calls round around, redondo alrededor, a title which Chillida gives to several of his early works. As we have seen, multiple meanings emerge when we walk around the sculpture and put ourselves in the place of the work. This is how occurs the embodying of places, as Heidegger calls it. According to Chillida, the meetings and places which emerge on the way owe their existence to the, what he calls, modulation of space, which produces a rumor of limits. The expressions modulation of space and rumor of limits, which constitute significant titles, as we see here, of several of his artworks, which were exposed in Zurich, exhibited in Zurich. These expressions point to a process which can only be indicated metaphorically. What Chillida expects is something astonishing. He expects space to become palpable. How? In his view, space is something absolutely fast and fleeting, like a music, which is, however, inaudible because of its tremendous velocity. But Chillida thinks that it is possible to slow down space by creating limits. Thus, space will become palpable if suitable limits delay its speed and make sound the fleeting tones, even though only a rumor will come out. Similarly, the experience of motion, which performs the round around, gives rise to a place. Now, if this is true, there has to be a void charged with a begetter force. It's the void which contains potential places, a void which is full thanks to its intrinsic force. Thus, to perform the motion around the void and to offer limits, as Chillida suggests and strives for, means to stimulate its begetter force, the begetter force of the void. In several notes which Heidegger made after his conversations with Chillida, one detects clearly the philosopher's interest in understanding, with the help of Chillida's works and reflections, the begetter void where space interplays with the sculpture. Heidegger points out that one should not conceive Chillida's works as a representation of something. One should rather contemplate them as a form which encloses or surrounds space, an expression which underlines the importance Chillida gave to the round around of the sculpture. There is no doubt that Heidegger received much inspiration by Chillida's work, and that he studied with great interest the artist's ideas and reflection on space, time, place, and void. But it is also important to emphasize the precision and originality with which the philosopher took up Chiyida's ideas. Heidegger recognized an important ontological relationship between place and void, which is only implicit in Chiyida's thought. This insight allowed him to take a further step concerning the ontological importance of the interplay between art and space. At the end of his essay, Heidegger suggests that even if art has the power to give truth a place, it is not the only way how truth can occur. Truth does not require necessarily a body or a thing, not even an artwork. It can float in the spirit, in the air, in the void, and we could add in the word. Thus, Heidegger ends his reflections with the following quote by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. It is not always necessary for the truth to embody itself. It is already enough if it floats around in a spirit producing concordance, if it waves seriously, gently, like the sound of a bell through the air. Es ist nicht immer nötig, dass das Wahre sich verkörpere. Schon genug, wenn es geistig umherschwebt und die Übereinstimmung bewirkt, wenn es wie Glockenton ernstfreundlich durch die Lüfte wogt. Thank you very much for your attention.
Does anybody want to ask? Mrs. Rabe?
It's not a question, it's more than thank you very much, Ana Maria. It's always wonderful to hear you. I think it's an opportunity to understand. Now I'm going to present and to talk about public sculptures, and I think that you have explained splendidly and wonderfully the way that to understand this connection between the space, the void, and this construction. So for me, it's always a pleasure to listen to you. And maybe before your conversation, we were talking about the way how you went to visit Switzerland, and you visited the archives of Heidegger, and maybe you could explain a little bit about this, because I think that it's wonderful. All this story with the archives of the philosopher. Maybe you want to share with us these moments.
Thank you, Nausicaa. I don't see you, but I hear your voice. Thank you so much. Yes, yeah, sure. It was an adventure. I had no time to tell all this a long story. The thing is that it was in 2014, right? Nausicaa was in Chida, in San Sebastian, and was with the invitation of the Chiyida's family. I could make some inquiries and investigation in the library by Chiyida, because I was very much interested in this collaboration, the intellectual exchange, as Ignacio Chiyida is one of his elder sons, of Chiyida's sons, gave me a letter. It was dated from January 1969. This was by Larese, one of these both gallerists, who wrote to Chiyida that he said to him, Chiyida and Heidegger had met 2 months before, in November 68, right? And in 2 months after, in January, Larese writes to Chiyida that Heidegger had not finished, not yet. He was working in his text. This was very interesting for me, for the following, because in the postdata, Larese says to Chiyida that Heidegger asked Chiyida to send him all what he had written on space. So, and Chiyida in some interviews and in some notes makes reference to this collaboration, that Heidegger was very, very much interested, and not only interested in the conversations, but he wanted to read, because what Chiyida wrote. Chiyida was not only a wonderful, as you know, sculptor and artist and graphic artist also, but also a really wonderful writer. He wrote like aphorisms or like haikus, poems, right? Full of philosophical and poetical sense on space, on time, and everything. So, and Heidegger knew that in that conversation with Chillida that he was writing. So he wanted him to send him. And it was not, was no study, no publication of this notes. So I decided to travel around. I had then, and I was already in Colombia in 1914 after my visit in Chillida and San Sebastian and so on, and the archive. I moved to Colombia, and then I had a research project which allowed me to travel to several places, not only to St. Gallen, to the archive, but also to Meßkirch and to Marbach Literaturarchiv. And finally, I found there not the selection of Chillida's writings, but something that was more astonishing even. It was a translation to German that Heidegger himself made from the notes of Chillida he had received. So this was, and then it's a long story. I found it was really, I felt like a detective. And to do it with Chillida and Heidegger, this was really for me a gift. And yes, finally I could really investigate much better what notions and what concepts could have influenced and touched Heidegger and be important for his thought. So this, what I have presented you in a longer version, is published in Spanish in a Spanish journal. Thank you for giving me the chance to explain it a little bit more.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any other questions?
Sorry, we don't know each other, but listening to you, I was wondering if among the readings you were mentioning, both had been working on, Heidegger and Chillida. Did anyone work with Henri Lefebvre?
Henri Lefebvre? Lefebvre. On Chillida and Lefebvre or Heidegger?
Lefebvre? No. Henri Lefebvre wrote La production sociale de l'espace. At the end of the 60s, he was working on this. So I was wondering if any of them had read his works.
Anyone, Chillida or Heidegger?
Yes.
I mean?
Yes.
I guess Heidegger probably. Chillida, I was, as I told you, I made an investigation of his libraries because I was very much interested what philosophers, poets, and so on he was reading, and I found lots of notes and underlines. I don't remember a book by Lefebvre, but it can be. It's probably because Chillida was a great reader. He had lots of important books and also philosophical books. So I don't remember. I have to check it, but I don't know. But it's probable. Just to finish, I wanted to show you this. What you see in the back is an homage. This is the first homage that Chillida made to Heidegger. It's homage to Heidegger in 1972. He made several graphic, but also a sculpture, which is in Frankfurt. I only just wanted to show it to you in honor to this collaboration between Chillida and Heidegger. Thank you very much again for the invitation.